your insight on that report, sir. Nigerian Labour Congress NLC has called on the International Monetary Fund IMF and the World Bank to cease lending to governments that are not accountable to their citizens, arguing that such loans exacerbate government crisis and deepen national debt. Speaking at the 2025 high-level meeting of the Global Labour Movement with the IMF and World Bank in Washington, D.C., NLC President Joe Ajaero criticized the institution's economic prescriptions, asserting they have worsened poverty and hindered development in Nigeria. Ajaero urged the IMF and World Bank to abandon blanket austerity measures and instead support developing nations in crafting progressive tax policies that protect vulnerable populations. In his presentation, Progressive Taxation and Fiscal Consolidation, Ajaero stated the current global economic order, influenced heavily by institutions such as the IMF and World Bank, often perpetuates inequality rather than addressing it. In many developing nations, including Nigeria, tax policies are regressive, placing a disproportionate burden on the poor while allowing the wealthy and multinational corporations to evade their fair share. He criticized the IMF and World Bank's historical emphasis on debt servicing over human development, questioning why they continue to lend to governments lacking accountability. Lending to governments that do not prioritize the welfare of their people is not development, it is exploitation, Ajaero asserted. What are your thoughts on this report?
I think I agree with him on the need to consider how you lend money to organizations. For all I know, the IMF is a body that lends money with a lot of conditionalities. So I think one of their conditionalities should also be how accountable is that government to the people. Then, how well has the government implemented previous loans and programs, and so many of those conditionalities they have given. You know, when you talk about IMF, it's a charged up discussion for many, especially in third world countries like Nigeria. The IMF may be nothing more than a doctor that cures by killing. You know, and it's funny. For some, they see the IMF as a meddlesome interloper. But that may not be completely true, because in most cases, as meddlesome as they appear, they don't just come with your agreement. And in some cases, it's actually the state that has approached them. Hello, come and give us some financial aid. Hello, you know, we need your technical. Then, like I said, when you ask them for loan, they come with conditional. Like he said, some of their policies...
But every loan organization comes with conditions.
Yeah, the IMF conditionalities in plural is plural. Now, at times could be choking. That's why that term, a doctor that cures by killing, comes in. What comes to mind, for example, is SAP.
Right.
The Structural Adjustment Program of 1986, the Babangida era. It was such a system that messed up the whole thing and wiped up the middle class in Nigeria, and which is why years after we are yet to recover from it as a people. You know, so some of the things they suggest, including what some of the conditionalities that came with the 1986 era, was liberalization of the economy, devaluation of the naira, removal of subsidies, you know, less government spending. And most of these things, if not all of them, has really not given the desired results. Yes, after the devaluation of the naira, Nigeria is still a heavy import country. After, you know, after the so-called privatization, we have not seen an improvement in service delivery. Infrastructural development is still poor. Rather, why majority of the masses adjusted structurally? Those in leadership or authority, if at all they did adjust, it wasn't in the direction the rest of us adjusted. they adjusted upward, their affluence level increase. So I think I agree with him. If you must give loans to government, give to government that are accountable, give to government that you see that are implementing those programs you prescribe, and make sure so that those your prescription are working. Prescription in medical terms, let's take it, but if you prescribe a drug to your patient and you monitor the patient taking the drug, if there seems to be no improvement, rather the patient is deteriorating, you may be forced to take a second look at that.
Why do you think they haven't taken a second look?
I cannot say for sure, while IMF have to be reminded by Ajero and other people to do that, because this is not the first time people be speaking up against the IMF, but somehow they seem convinced that this structural adjustment program, liberalization and all the conditionality that comes with it is the right way to go. However, at times, the challenge with IMF prescriptions may not be with the prescriptions itself, it may be with those implementing it, because some of these policies they threw at us that have failed woefully here seems to succeed in other places. In some Latin American nations and states, they bore fruit and their economic situation changed a little bit. That again brings to mind what Ajero is saying. Don't just give out the loans, monitor your loans, see that these governments are accountable to the people, because if a government is accountable, he should explain that this is what we have done and this is the result before we move on to the next phase.
You know, what beats the question is usually when you get a normal loan from a bank, they went to see the business, they come inspect the business and see that it's actually going on. So it beats the question why IMF needs to be reminded. Because Nigeria is being funded mostly via loans. Most of
a good percentage of the budget.
A good percentage of the budget
comes from borrowing.
But
all the borrowings are not from IMF alone.
Of course, there's also World Bank in it.
Those are all Bretton Woods institutions, so we can lump them
them together. But then, given that, we're always dipping hands, stretching hands, and taking in, it's the question why a body like IMF and the World Bank hasn't checked the grassroots to say, okay, this monies we've been giving to you, show us proof. Because at the end of every election, usually you see the buying of lots of cars. Was that part of the plan when these monies were buried? Remember that the cost of living shot up, and many people, actually there was a report a few weeks ago about people waiting for burials and weddings and waiting for remnants to eat off people's plates. I mean, the level of poverty has surged over time. Right. Don't you think that should beg the question of what this money is actually being used for? Before you put out, take a loan, you actually have a plan of what you want to use the monies for. Now, if these monies are not used in that way, why do you think they still keep giving?
That's actually the crux of Ajero's argument.
Right.
He said, before you give out these monies, ensure that these governments are accountable and transparent. And what is transparency and accountability if not telling us how your policies have improved the country? IMF gives loan. Now, the viability when they give their loan, of course, they know that the country can pay back within a given period of time. But beyond paying back, what is the impact of that loan on the ordinary citizen? Because ab initio, the Bretton Woods institutions were set up not just to give loan, but to ensure the standard of living across the world and member states improves. So the loans they give out is not an end in itself, but a means to an end to help achieve these goals, to help ensure that weaker nations have resources to implement certain programs and policies that will lift their citizens off the poverty level. So if you continue giving money and the people are getting poorer, I think it goes on IMF also to be bold enough to say, this money you have given to you have not borne result. And the thing with IMF is this, though there are other organizations that nations borrow money from, but if IMF take a stand, I'm sure it will affect how other lending institutions may also look at you. So they can then, their advices, they but again, the governments are somewhat independent of them. So when all they can do is give an advice and say, oh, this is it. But like Hajero said, if you notice that the loan you're giving are not producing results, why give another loan? Because it's a burden that you're putting on the people over time. Generations unborn, we have to pay these loans. Yet there have been no impact. I mean, I'll be better off paying a loan that has elevated my status rather than paying a loan that I can't tell how or what it was used for.
Thank you.